No. No. Oh, there. Stop. Agriculture is the backbone and the mainstay of the Irish rural economy, and the rural economy is in terminal decline because agriculture is in terminal decline because of deliberate policies by the EU to wind down supports for the family farm, which has resulted in a hemorrhage of farm families in Ireland, the destruction of the traditional family farm unit, and the real reduction in terms of full-time farmers from 300,000 when we joined the EEC in 1973 to 27,000 full-time farmers are classified with that status according to recent CSO statistics, out of 125,000 farmers in total. Most farmers depend on off-farm income for their survival. So instead of the family farm being able to keep the farm family and spin-offs from agriculture being able to provide useful employment in rural areas, the family farmer himself is dependent on off-farm income, himself or his spouse working off-farm to bring in sufficient supplementary income to in addition to subsidies to keep the farm business going, which is totally unsustainable long term. The National Party obviously has a very clear vision in relation to agriculture. We have identified the problems in relation to the sector. The problems is hyper-regulation imposed by faceless bureaucrats in the European Union and Brussels. Also, anti-competitive practices are carried on by the meat industry in particular, which can set product prices that are paid for meat. They are the price makers and farmers are the price takers. The National Party policy would ensure that there would be a regulator to oversee and guarantee fairness and transparency from farm to fork, to ensure that the farmers get a fair shake, they get a fair share of the final retail price that consumers pay for food. And if farmers got a fair share of that retail price, that should be sufficient to provide provide farmers with a sufficient income to guarantee independent profitability and ensure that the farmers would be less reliant on subsidies and maybe independently profitable of subsidies. Farmers belong to a proud tradition. If we go back to in our history to the 19th century, and again go back to what the National Party talks about, the national idea and about the struggle for national independence. Well, tied to the struggle for national independence was the struggle to gain land ownership on the part of the indigenous population and on the part of family farmers who back in the mid 19th century, at the time of the famine and for several decades afterwards, didn't own the land that they farmed. The land was largely owned by foreign landlords. You had a situation where we had land wars and where we had the national independence movement was tied to the struggle to gain land ownership, which was finally achieved before we attained independence, while we were still ruled by the British, because of the Land Acts and the establishment of the Land Commission. This enabled tenant farmers to acquire the land that they farmed. And ironically, or maybe inevitably, since we joined the EEC, and now which has evolved in the EU, the Land Commission, which was set up by a British Conservative government at the turn of the 19th, 20th centuries, the same Land Commission has been abolished under EU law. The establishment of a Land Commission to ensure that farmers could increase the size of their land holdings to remain viable. Such a body is forbidden under EU law, because the EU is only interested in the modern collectivization of agriculture. They're interested in the elimination and extinction of the family farm, to be replaced with industrial farming units owned by big business interests. And we see now, and I can speak from my own personal experience. I'm farming here for the last 25 years, and when I started farming, in 1992, if I contrast my average income derived from the family farm with the same income now, with the income I generated from the same farm now, my income has more than halved since then, and that's reflected across the board throughout this country. One time, if a farmer owned 100 acres, he was considered a large farmer. Now you're considered a small farmer if you farm 100 acres. It's generally accepted by the state advisory agency on agriculture named Teagasc, that in excess of 200 acres is required on a dry stock farm to guarantee a basic income for that for the farmer working that land. 200 acres 50 years ago would be considered a ranch in this country. There has been a very steady, relentless decline in the fabric of rural Ireland in which the family farm depends. If you eliminate the family farm, you destroy the soul of rural Ireland. And the National Party is committed to winning back the soul of rural Ireland, saving rural Ireland, restoring the profitability of the family farm, which is central to that and integral to that objective. And the policies of the National Party are the only policies that will rescue the family farm and rescue rural Ireland from its ultimate demise and from the current terminal decline that it's suffering.